Coming up on Network Africa. South Africa's State Persecuting Authority issues an arrest warrant for Grace Mugabe, Zimbabwe's former First Lady. Two former presidents compete in Madagascar's runoff election. And an international investigation into the post-election violence in Zimbabwe finds both sides guilty of the death of 6 people. Hello and welcome to the midweek edition of the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. A lobby group in South Africa says the state's persecuting authority has issued an arrest warrant for Grace Mugabe, Zimbabwe's former First Lady. The lobby group, AfriForum, which has been pursuing the case, made the announcement about the arrest warrant at a press conference this morning. Mrs. Mugabe is accused of assaulting a young model, Gabriella Angels, in a hotel in South Africa's main city, Johannesburg, in 2017. She was allowed to return home after she applied for diplomatic immunity, but in July this year, a court annulled that government decision. Mrs. Mugabe said at the time that she had acted in self-defense after the model, whom she described as intoxicated and unhinged, attacked her in a hotel room where her 2 sons lived. The alleged assault took place about 3 months before the military takeover in Zimbabwe, which saw Robert Mugabe resign as president after 37 years in power. Voting is underway in Madagascar as citizens choose the island state's next leader. 2 former presidents are competing in the runoff election after failing to gain outright victory in November's election. Mark Ravalomanana and Andry Rajoelina got 35.35% and 39.23% respectively. Madagascar is hoping for a second peaceful election since unrest in 2009 when Ravalomanana was forced out of office by protest led by Rajoelina in what the African Union and other international organizations said is a coup. Togo will go ahead with legislative elections amid a crisis that has sent thousands of people to the streets. Citizens are calling for the resignation of the president who has been in power since 2005. Togo's constitutional reform is proposing to allow him to rule the West African country until 2030.
Togo's ruling party, UNIR, is determined to go on with the December 20 parliamentary elections, despite the boycott by the opposition. On Thursday, citizens will go to the polls to vote for their parliament members, following a campaign marked by opposition boycott and violent protests. Protesters say a constitutional reform by President Nassingbe would allow him to rule the West African country until 2030. The ruling party has refused to yield, saying the protests are only supported by a small minority that strayed.
We reach out today to those among our brothers and sisters who have decided to destroy the country, to block the country, to ask them to join us so we can build peace together.
A coalition of 14 opposition parties are boycotting the parliamentary elections, denouncing irregularities in their preparations, saying the constitutional, electoral and institutional reforms needed before they can be held have not been done. They have also called for people to boycott and prevent the elections from happening by any means.
These elections cannot but trigger violence, mourning and a lot of suffering. We have had enough here in Togo. This is why we keep on saying that the government must not hold these elections.
Togo has been engulfed in a political crisis for over a year. It has seen thousands of people take to the streets of Lomé and other cities, calling for the resignation of President Faure Nassingbe. Regional efforts to resolve the ongoing crisis between the authorities and the opposition have stalled.
All campaign rallies have been banned in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, for security reasons ahead of Sunday's presidential elections. The city's governor, Andre Kimbuta, who is a member of the ruling party, said he had received information that extremists from the camps of all the presidential candidates were planning a confrontation in the streets. One of the opposition candidates, Martin Fayulu, is already hit out at the move. His team says authorities are trying to stop him from campaigning. With President Joseph Kabila due to step down, this election is the first time the country is changing its leadership through a vote since independence. Previous transitions of power have all been violent. An international investigation into the post-election violence in Zimbabwe has found both the government and opposition leaders guilty. The probe described the use of live bullets by the military to quell the post-election protests in August as unjustified. The main opposition party was found to have orchestrated, incited and prompted the violence. President Emmerson Mnangagwa's decision to deploy the military was found to be lawful, but the commission blamed the military's use of live rounds for the deaths. 6 people were killed and 35 were injured. Former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe led the commission. The report called for compensation for the victims and punishment for the perpetrators.
However, the use of live ammunition directed at people, especially when they were fleeing, was clearly unjustified and disproportionate. The Commission's finding on a balance of probabilities from all the evidence received is that the deaths of these 6 people and the injuries sustained by the 35 others arose from the actions of the military and the police.
I think the report was fair. It was touching on all aspects that people were complaining about, considering what happened on the 1st of August, especially the issue of military, the shooting of people, and then even the violence by opposition members who were protesting. We are yet to see what the government of Zimbabwe is going to do with all the perpetrators, especially the soldiers, who will be later on be nailed as the ones responsible for shooting the people.